I decided to remarry your sister. What? What are you talking about? Because if I stay married to you, I can't live in that mansion. My husband easily discarded me and remarried my sister. All for the mansion worth $3 million left by our deceased father. My sister, who has always been hostile towards me, proudly flaunted her relationship with my husband. She boasted, that mansion and your husband, they are all mine now. Well, if that's what she wants, she can have it. Given the situation, I won't hold back either. Because that house, they still don't know what it really means to inherit that house. My name is Wendy Mason, 28 years old. After graduating from university, I joined my father's company and have been working hard there ever since. To meet my father's expectations, I have worked hard since I got the job. Until then, I only thought about work, but surprisingly, I got married a year ago. Now, I am living a normal, happy married life. My husband's name is Alex, 33 years old. We met at a mixer I was dragged to by a colleague from work. At the mixer, I unexpectedly hit it off with Alex and we got married quickly after dating for 6 months. People were surprised that I, who had no interest in romance, was getting married. But I was the most surprised. Getting married after only 6 months of dating was unthinkable for the old me. But I liked Alex that much. He is an ordinary office worker like me, but there is a significant difference in our incomes. He feels inferior because of this income gap, and even after a year of marriage, I haven't been able to tell him how much I earn. Therefore, I haven't been able to tell him that my father is the president of the company, and that I will eventually succeed him. I think I should tell him someday, but surely not now. I will wait until our relationship of trust deepens before I tell him everything. That's what I thought. Then, one day, as usual, while I was working at the office, my father, the president, called me. We try not to interact much at work, so I felt a bit uncomfortable being called by him at the office. But he is not someone who would call me without a reason. With questions in mind, I went to the president's office where my father was waiting. As I knocked, I heard a voice saying, "Come in." When I opened the door, I saw my father with a somewhat sad expression. "Father, no, President Mason. Did you call for me?" "It's okay, Wendy. Just treat me as your father for now." Then, Dad. "Is something wrong?" "Actually, there's something I need to explain to you." "Explain? What about?" "About the company. I've been thinking I need to talk to you about making you the president." "What? Now?" What I first felt was, why now? Indeed, as the eldest daughter, I did want to take over my father's company eventually. Our family lost our mother in an accident more than 10 years ago. Since then, my father has been raising my sister and me by himself. My sister Becky went through a rebellious phase and was quite troublesome, even running away from home at one point. Even now, she doesn't have a stable job and lives day to day doing part-time work, which further motivates me to meet my father's expectations. But my father is only 55 years old. There are still 5 years until his retirement. And he always used to say he'd keep working regardless of retirement age. But why now? Why talk about the company at this timing? By the way, my father had just built a mansion worth $3 million a few months ago. He was happily talking about his dream of living there someday with close friends. But now, my usually hopeful father is looking so sad in front of me, trying to entrust his company to me. I couldn't help but feel it. Maybe my father won't be around much longer. To dispel this fear, I asked my father with a prayerful heart, "Hey, Dad. What's happening all of a sudden? I do want to take over your company eventually, but isn't this too soon?" "It's not too soon. The sooner, the better. But here, I've compiled some documents about our company. Please go through them when you have time. Okay. As I quietly agreed, my father said, "Thank you," and smiled. His face was not that of the company president, but unmistakably of father. Feeling something was off with my father's behavior, I left the president's office, not wanting to pry further. He didn't tell me anything important, but that fact alone unsettled me. That night, when I got home, my husband had already returned. Unable to keep it to myself, I ended up telling him everything. Today, this happened. Then, my husband's eyes widened in surprise. Wait a minute. Your father is the president of your company? Yes. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret. No, that's okay. But why would your father suddenly start talking about handing over the business? I don't know. But you know, right? Dad just bought a house a few months ago. Oh, yeah, that huge house, right? I knew he was rich, but that was shocking. Of course. That house costs $3 million. $3 million. My husband's eyes widened at that sum, so far from our everyday lives. I nodded slightly to him. It's strange, right? Dad, who was so happy talking about the future, suddenly wanting to hand over the presidency to me. I have a bad feeling about this. No, you're overthinking it. Besides, that means we'll eventually get that house, right? No, that's not what we should be talking about right now. This is crazy. I'm so excited. Living in a $3 million mansion someday. Too lucky. Alex, wait. My husband's eyes shone, not listening to my words at all. I wanted to talk about my worries about my father, but Alex was completely preoccupied with the thought of inheriting my father's mansion. It doesn't matter about Dad's house right now. I talked to Alex because I was anxious about keeping it to myself. Why can't he empathize with my worries? But maybe, as my husband says, I'm just overthinking it. 2 months passed, still concerned about my father's behavior. One morning at 7 a.m., I was awakened by a call from the housekeeper who lived with my father. The news was of my father's sudden death. It seems the housekeeper found my father collapsed in the hallway. When she arrived for work as usual at 6 a.m., he was immediately taken to the hospital by ambulance, but it was said he had already passed away. I'm sorry for the late contact. In the background of the phone call, the housekeeper's voice was close to tears. Unable to bear the rising grief, I cried out loud. I found out that a few months ago, my father had been given a terminal diagnosis. He went to the hospital after feeling symptoms, where he discovered his cancer had metastasized throughout his body, making surgery impossible. He had been undergoing medication treatment while still visiting the hospital, but the tumors never shrank. So, he decided to entrust me with his legacy. Ironically, the cause of my father's death wasn't the cancer itself. According to the doctor, it was a heart attack. If it weren't for the attack, he might have lived longer. This thought made me feel nothing but frustration. I decided to meet with my sister, Becky, to tell her this fact. She arrived 30 minutes late at our meeting place. When I told her about our father's death, she initially showed shock but quickly lit up with excitement. So, that means we get Dad's inheritance, right? What? Are you serious? Does that mean we get that house too? You're working, so you don't need it, right? Give it to me. I'm appalled. Dad just died, and you're talking about this? Well, Dad donated all his savings, right? The only thing left for us to inherit is that house, isn't it? She was right about that. Dad had always disliked hoarding money. donating all his income to children's homes and refugees abroad. That's why I was a bit happy when he built that mansion. At last, he had spent some money on himself. But my sister, who had always been a nuisance and still led a troubled life, only saw Dad's wealth. Far from grieving his death, she was only thinking about her own benefits. That's why I made a decision to let her experience firsthand that reality is not so sweet. That mansion, bought only a few months ago, still had many years of payments left. Dad, probably not expecting such a huge amount, had taken a regular mortgage. Unaware of this, I told my sister, "I'll give you that house." When I told her about the renunciation of my inheritance, Becky clapped her hands in joy. Yes. Thank you, sis. Now the $3 million mansion is mine. Talk about an easy gain. That my sister could be so blinded by money. Anger and a tinge of sadness eroded my heart. Becky didn't even attend Dad's funeral a few days later. As if that wasn't enough to upset me, my husband's behavior was the last straw. Lying exhausted on the sofa, he happily asked me, "So, when can we move into that house?" "What?" "You know, your dad's mansion." "Becky, she wasn't too nice to your dad, right? So, the inheritance of the $3 million mansion is yours, right?" It seemed my husband was of the same breed as my sister. With my father's recent death, all he could think about was the inheritance. I coldly told him the truth. "Becky will live there. I'm not inheriting anything." "What?" "Hey, Wendy, what are you saying?" "Becky said she wanted it, so I gave it to her." "What's that, a joke, right?" "Wendy, you're kidding, right?" He grabbed my shoulders and shook me hard. When I continued to be unresponsive, he slumped his shoulders and left the house. Since that day, my husband hasn't returned home. He reads my messages but doesn't reply. I don't know what he intends, but he seems very upset that I gave the mansion to Becky. After all, since the day he found out my father was a company president, he changed. If it meant getting Dad's mansion, my father's death didn't matter to him. Just like my sister, he showed no sign of mourning. In the end, they are probably of the same kind. Cruelly, it seems that bad things tend to pile up. When my husband Alex returned home after a few days, my sister Becky was inexplicably with him. Alex glared at me and said with an arrogant expression, "I've decided to remarry your sister." "What?" "What are you talking about?" "Because, if I stay married to you, I can't live in that mansion." "You're joking, right?" "Divorce me for that house?" He slammed the divorce papers he was holding onto the table. His part was already filled out, showing his seriousness. As I stood there dumbfounded, Becky mocked me. "Sorry, sis." "But I can't help it, right? Alex chose me, not you. Are you serious about this?" "Of course." "That mansion and Alex, they're all mine now." "I finally beat you, sis." They hugged each other happily right before my eyes. That was the moment the devil inside me woke up. So, that's how it is. Fine, let them. After all, that house, they don't know it still has a hefty mortgage remaining. They can't possibly pay off the mortgage with their incomes. Their downfall is inevitable. Now, I am a demon of revenge. I have no intention of telling them the truth. Let them inherit it without knowing anything, and later face the harsh reality. This is something I can do because I've lived my life so earnestly. I can exact this revenge because I worked hard near my father, trying to meet his expectations. I took a deep breath and looked coldly at my husband and sister. They shuddered as I decisively said, "Okay. I'll divorce you then?" "What?" "You're surprisingly agreeable." "Really?" Do you understand your situation, sis? I understand. In return, I will take over Dad's company. No problem, right? I don't care, as long as I get that house. I don't know much about management. The company, you can have it, sis. Is that so? Good. Then, that's settled for the inheritance. I'll prepare the documents and bring them later. After that, I packed up my things and decided to leave the apartment I shared with my husband. Honestly, it wasn't particularly large or special, as we rented it based on his income. I temporarily moved to a monthly apartment, first submitting the divorce papers. I gathered all the necessary documents for the inheritance and headed back to them a week later. Can you sign these necessary documents? My sister signed the inheritance-related documents without hesitation. Notably, the documents about the ownership of Dad's house stated, if there is a mortgage, the new owner must repay it. Becky didn't even read that. They are currently preoccupied with the soon-to-be theirs $3 million mansion. Rational action is beyond them now. Hell awaits them for their rash actions. I suppressed my emerging laughter and left them behind. 1 month later, the call that rang on my smartphone while I was working in the president's office was none other than my ex-husband, Alex. He's finally realized. With a casual mindset, I answered the phone. Hello? Hey, Wendy. What the hell is this? What's wrong? You seem so panicked. Could it be you're struggling to pay the mortgage? So you knew everything, didn't you? You knew and still let Becky inherit that house, right? Of course. It's naive to think about inheriting the estate without grieving Dad's death. What? Don't mess with me. I have nothing to do with this. Fix it. Nothing to do with it. I felt a vein in my head burst with his words. Before I knew it, I was yelling louder than ever. Don't joke with me. You're just like Becky. Did you ever grieve when Dad died? Did you ever comfort me? All you thought about was that house. You immediately asked when we could live there, didn't you? I haven't forgotten. No, it's not like that. I didn't mean to. Then what? Am I supposed to believe a scumbag who divorces me for a $3 million mansion and marries my sister? That's not what a normal person does. You and Becky are just vile. The worst kind of people who'll do anything for money. Calm down, Wendy. How can I be calm? I don't care if you both go to hell. Suffer for your actions for the rest of your life. But, Wendy, wait. I cut off his voice by hanging up the phone. To ensure I never interact with them again, I blocked both their numbers. Later, as expected, they couldn't pay the loan and had to let go of Dad's mansion. Although it found a buyer, the sale left them with a $500,000 deficit. This means that now, those two, or more precisely, my sister Becky, are saddled with a debt of $500,000. However, since Alex also signed as a co-signer during the change of the house's ownership, it effectively became a debt for both of them. They'll likely spend their entire lives repaying this debt. But I won't sympathize. This is the rightful punishment for their disregard of Dad. As for me, I will continue to protect the company Dad built. Hopefully, one day in heaven, I'll tell Dad, I protected the company. Hearing "well done" from Dad in heaven is my current dream.